The prince was walking with his fiancée and froze when he saw his pregnant ex-wife carrying firewood. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Snow squeaked under their boots, that thin, crisp sound that meant the cold had hardened everything it touched. "Smile, Highness," Friedrich murmured at Leopold's side, her gloved hand tucked neatly into his arm. "If you look as if you are walking to your execution, people will talk." Leopold drew in the sharp winter air and tried. The square of Innsbruck stretched ahead of them, lined with stalls and narrow facades. Men dipped their heads, women curtsied, boys tugged caps away with reddened fingers. A path opened in the dirty snow as they advanced. "I do not walk to my execution," he said quietly. "Only to the baker's stall." "Today," she replied, lifting her chin with that careful grace she had been bred to. "Next month to the altar. You must accustom yourself to being watched." He glanced sideways at her. Friedrich Adler was everything the court had wanted. Well-born, well-educated, perfectly controlled. Her dark hair was hidden under a fur-lined bonnet, her profile steady, as if carved. She walked as if every eye upon them were a test she intended to pass. He envied her composure and hated that he envied it. A butcher's boy slipped on the ice near them, dropping a paper-wrapped bundle. The meat skidded. Friedrich's hand tightened on Leopold's arm, but she only smiled faintly as the boy scrambled up. "Careful," Leopold said, stepping slightly toward him. The boy stammered an apology and backed away, too terrified to reclaim his fallen package. An older man swept in, snatching it up and bowing awkwardly. "The people are nervous," Friedrich murmured when they moved on. "There are too many rumors." "There are always rumors," he answered. "Yes," she said, "but usually they do not involve you." He said nothing. Rumors, whispers about his health, about his suitability, about his first marriage, the one no one dared ask him about directly. Ahead, in the center of the square, a crowd had gathered around a cart laden with firewood. The vendor shouted prices, and villagers jostled, gloves fumbling for coins. The air smelled faintly of smoke and horses. "Is this wise?" Friedrich asked. "To walk without the full guard?" He made himself shrug. "They are near enough, and if anyone throws snow at me, you may defend me with that sharp tongue of yours." She allowed herself a quick, low laugh. "I should prefer not to begin my married life by scolding your subjects in public." "Very sensible," he murmured. The cartman tossed down a bundle of wood, the pieces clattering on the ground. A woman bent to lift them. The bundle looked too heavy for her. The rope slipped, and several sticks rolled toward the prince's polished boots. Leopold stopped instinctively. Friedrich's foot brushed against a log, but she held her balance. "Careful," he began, half to the woman, half to Friedrich. Then the woman straightened. Her scarf had slipped, revealing hair hastily coiled at the nape of her neck. Her cheeks were flushed with cold and effort. Her coat was worn at the seams, mended with thread that did not quite match. She was breathing hard, one hand pressed unconsciously against the swell of her belly beneath the wool. Her eyes met his. The world gave a lurch so violent he thought, absurdly, that the earth itself had moved. Leopold's breath vanished. The sound of the square receded until all he could hear was the sudden rush of his own pulse. "Clara," he heard himself say, but no sound left his lips. She froze as if struck. Recognition flickered across her features, followed by something like sheer naked alarm. Her hand went more firmly to her stomach. For a heartbeat, she looked as she had once looked in the palace corridors, caught, unprepared, too honest. Then her gaze dropped. She bent to snatch up the fallen pieces of wood as if they were a shield. Friedrich's fingers dug into his arm. "Who is she?" Friedrich asked, voice low, almost calm. "Leopold?" He did not answer. Could not. The vendor made an impatient gesture. "Come, Frau, off with you, others are waiting." Clara flinched at the tone, not at the words. She gathered the last of the wood, hoisting the bundle onto her shoulder. The movement dragged at her. He saw the strain in the way she tightened her jaw, the way her body tried to protect the life inside her and obey the demands of the world around her at once. She turned away. "Clara," he said aloud this time. She hesitated. Her back stiffened. He saw the slight hitch of her breath, the decision in her shoulders, and then she moved on, step after slow step, through the slush. Leopold's legs started after her before his mind had caught up. "Highness," Friedrich hissed, tugging his arm. "What are you doing?" He shook her off gently but firmly. "I must speak to her." "In the middle of the square? With everyone watching?" The edges of her voice sharpened. "You will not. I will," he said. He heard the murmur of the crowd rise. They were not deaf, these people. They saw their prince staring after a peasant woman with the intensity of a man seeing a ghost. "Leopold." Friedrich stepped in front of him for a heartbeat, forcing his eyes to meet hers. "Tell me who she is." He looked down at her, seeing not her carefully arranged features but the fear behind them. She was too proud to show it openly, but it was there. She understood, even without the name, that this was no trivial acquaintance. He opened his mouth. The truth crowded behind his teeth. He stopped. The word lodged like a stone. She had never heard it. No one at court was allowed to speak of Clara that way anymore. "I will explain," he managed. "Later. I give you my word. And until then, I am to endure this spectacle?" she asked. He glanced past her. Clara's figure was already slipping through the market, careful, slow steps that tried not to draw attention and drew it all the more. The bundle on her shoulder seemed to grow heavier with each pace. Leopold moved around Friedrich. She caught his sleeve, but he twisted free. A murmur rose from the onlookers. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another voice said, "I heard he once." Friedrich stood rooted, her cheeks burning, feeling the eyes on her now. The prince's fiancée, abandoned in the middle of the square, while he pursued a woman in torn gloves. Her throat tightened. She forced her spine straight and called after him in a voice that did not tremble. "Highness, do not forget that you are not alone." He paused for half a heartbeat, then walked on. Friedrika watched him go, one hand pressed over the other, fingers cold despite the gloves. Questions crowded her mind, but one thought repeated itself with terrible clarity. "This is not the beginning I expected." Clara felt his presence behind her long before she heard his steps. The sensation crawled across her skin, a weight between her shoulder blades. She kept her gaze fixed on the path ahead, on the uneven snow, on anything but him. Of all the days, she thought, of all the places. Her breath steamed in short clouds. The bundle dug into her collarbone. She adjusted it, biting back a small sound of discomfort. "Let me help you," a man's voice said at her side, rough but kind. An older villager, cap in hand, nodded toward the wood. "It is too much in your condition." She managed a thin smile. "Thank you, Hans, but I can manage." "You should not be carrying such weights," he muttered. "Where is that brother of yours?" "Working," she said. "Someone must." Hans grumbled something about lazy relatives and moved on, nodding respectfully toward the figure he now realized was the prince. Clara's stomach clenched. She reached the edge of the square, where the packed snow gave way to the beginning of the mountain path. The houses grew smaller here, squeezed together, their windows clouded. She turned up toward them without looking back. "Clara," Leopold said again, closer now. Her foot slipped. For one terrifying instant, she felt herself pitch forward. The wood lurched, the world tilted. A strong hand caught her elbow. She gasped. His grip was familiar, the way he steadied her with just enough force to hold, never to bruise. For a second, memory flashed so vividly that the cold dropped away, and she was once more in a palace corridor, laughing, his hand on her waist as they turned too quickly. She jerked her arm free, as if burned. "You should not be walking on ice with such a burden," he said, breathing a little harder from the brisk walk. "Let me carry it." "You should not be here," she replied, still not looking at his face. "Let go of me, Highness." The title landed between them like a wall. He stared at her profile. "You never called me that." "I do now," she said. He reached for the bundle. "You will fall." She stepped back, almost losing her balance again, rather than allow him to take the weight. "If I do, it is my fall, not yours. You should go back to your fiancée." The word struck him cleanly. He swallowed. "You know of her. Everyone knows of her. Innsbruck has ears." She drew in a careful breath. "Please, leave me." "I will not," he said. "I cannot just—" "You did once," she cut in quietly. That silenced him more effectively than any shouted reproach. Behind them, distant now, the square still hummed. The two guards who had followed at a discreet distance stopped near a corner, unsure whether to intervene. Their breath smoked as they exchanged uneasy glances. One of them shifted his weight, but Leopold's raised hand kept them back. Clara turned her face slightly, enough to let him see how tired she was. Shadows under her eyes, lines of strain that had no place on a woman her age. The innocence he remembered had not vanished, but it had thinned under the weight of many hard days. "You should not be standing in the road," she said. "Someone will see." "They already have," he answered. "The whole town saw. They saw me walk away from my betrothed to follow you. Do you think I care for glances now?" "You always cared," she said, but her voice was softer. His gaze dropped to the curve of her belly. The coat tried to hide it, but could not. Life announced itself even beneath worn winter wool. "Clara," he whispered, "are you—" She shifted the bundle so it blocked his view as much as possible. "It is none of your concern." "How can it be none of my concern?" His words came out sharper than he intended, fear sharpening them. "Look at you. Where is your family? Who helps you? Why are you carrying wood like a common servant when— When what?" Her eyes flashed now. "When once I lived in rooms so grand I was afraid to touch the curtains. When I had maids to lace my gowns. Those days are done. They did not have to be," he said. She laughed then, a short, bitter sound that did not suit her. "Of course they did. The council decided. The papers were signed. The prince was set free. You are very nearly a married man again. I have heard enough whispers to know that much. Why are you here, Leopold?" He inhaled as if the name itself hurt. "Because I thought you were dead." That startled her. Her shoulders flinched. The bundle slipped a fraction lower. "Dead?" she repeated. "Yes." His voice dropped. "After you left the palace, they told me your father was ill. Then that he had died. Then someone said you had gone to relatives in another province. Years passed, each rumor contradicted the last. I asked. They said it was better not to linger on what was finished. Eventually I thought—" He hesitated. "I thought you must be gone. Truly gone." "I'm very much here," she said. "As you can see." He opened his hands, helpless. "I see you carrying wood for strangers." "For myself," she corrected. "And for the child you have just noticed." His throat closed. The words would not form. He wanted to ask when, how, but the answer might cut him in ways he did not yet understand. She read his silence easily. She had always been able to read him too well. "Do not look at me as if I have betrayed you," she said, anger stirring now. "I did nothing that was not demanded of me." "I know they demanded you leave," he said. "I know they came to you with documents and with threats. I heard pieces. Not enough. Never enough. I tried—" "You tried too late," she said. He took a small step closer. "Come back with me, at least to the town. There is an inn where we can speak in private." "In the town where your fiancé's family owns half the windows people watch from?" she asked. "No, thank you, Clara. You cannot bring me back into that world and then send me away again when they disapprove," she said. "I will not be the secret shame of your palace a second time." "They were wrong," he said, feeling his control unravel. "The council, the ministers, even my father. I should have fought harder. I was a coward, I know that. Just let me make it right." "Can you undo the years?" she asked. "Can you unsay the whispers about barrenness and unfitness? Can you give my father his good name back? Can you give me back the child I thought I would never have because they told you I was incapable?" Her hand went unconsciously to her stomach. "No, you cannot." He stared. "Who told you you were incapable?" She blinked, realizing what she had said. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "It does not matter," she muttered. "It matters to me," he said. "It always did." They said nothing definite, only hints. Only that the match was unsuitable, that the church had doubts, that there were grave reasons. I asked to see the reports. They told me it was indecent, that such documents could not be shown even to the husband. I was young and stupid enough to believe them. "And now?" she asked. "Do you believe them now?" He looked at her belly. No. A gust of wind swept down from the mountains, stinging their faces. Clara shivered, her free hand wrapping over her coat. "You will fall ill," he said. "Please let me walk you home. Wherever you are staying, then at least I shall know you are safe." "My safety does not trouble the court," she said. "It troubles me." He sounded so tired that something in her softened against her will. Once he had spoken to her like this in quiet evenings, when there was no crown between them, only a man uncertain of his worth and a woman foolish enough to reassure him. She sighed. My home is up this path. You may walk as far as the turn. No farther. That is something, he said. She started up the path again. The climb was steeper. Her steps grew slower. After a few paces, without asking, he took the bundle from her shoulder. She protested, but weakly. You will wreck your back, he said. Let me be useful in some small way for once. She let him. The wood was heavy, but he felt oddly grateful for its weight. It gave his hands something to do, his muscles something to strain against that was not invisible and unsolvable. People passed them, some nodding respectfully to the prince, others pretending not to see. Every glance felt like a brand. Clara kept her eyes straight ahead. Friedrich, back in the square, had resumed walking with the guards trailing her now. Her face was a mask. A few ladies approached, murmuring polite concern. Is His Highness unwell? One asked sweetly. No, Friedrich said. He wished to speak with someone. Their brows arched. Someone? A woman in need of charity, she said coolly. He has always had a soft heart. There. Let them chew on that, she thought. Let them think him merely generous. She would not feed their hunger for scandal with her own wounded pride. Still, as she walked back toward the palace, her mind replayed the scene over and over. The way his hand had tightened on hers, the way his eyes had gone blank with shock. There was history there, deep history. And history in courts like theirs was never harmless. Up the path, Leopold and Clara reached the turn, where the last of the town dropped away. From here, the road narrowed between low stone walls, leading to scattered cottages. This is far enough, Clara said. He stopped, unwilling, the bundle still balanced on his shoulder. How much further is your house? Not far, she said. I have walked it every day these last months. Alone? He asked. Yes. She took the wood from him, refusing to meet his gaze. You may return now. Your courtiers will be missing you. I am not thinking of them, he said. You should. They are thinking of you, she replied, and of your bride. He flinched. It is not as simple as you think. It seldom is, she said quietly. For a moment neither of them spoke. The cold wrapped around them, thinner here but still biting. A crow cried overhead. Clara, he said at last, I will come back. Do not, she said immediately. I must. I have questions. I need to know what happened to you after you left. How you came to be here. Who... She cut him off. Knowing will change nothing. You have a life to live at the palace. I have mine. They told you there was no hope, he said. Of children. Of us. Someone lied. I intend to find out who. Her shoulders tightened. If you stir old ashes, you will burn yourself. Better that than to live in ignorance, he replied. Better for whom? She asked. He had no answer. She shifted the bundle once more, then, with a small nod that might have been farewell, turned up the path. He watched her until a curve in the road hid her from sight. The absence of her figure struck him almost physically. He stood there, rooted, the snow creaking under his boots. For a few heartbeats, the silence of the mountains swallowed the noise of the town below. Then, hoofbeats shattered it. A horseman galloped up the lower road, cloak flying, breath streaming from both rider and animal. One of Leopold's guards stepped forward, hand raised, but the rider had already recognized the prince. Your Highness, the man called, reining in sharply. The horse snorted, hooves striking sparks from a buried stone. I have been searching everywhere. Leopold dragged his gaze from the empty curve of the path. What is it? An urgent summons from His Majesty, the rider said, dismounting hastily. You are to return to the palace at once. The council is assembled. It concerns your first marriage, Highness. Leopold's heart lurched. He looked once more toward the bend in the path where Clara had disappeared, then back to the road leading down to the palace, feeling that whatever choice he made in the next breath would alter all their lives forever. Leopold's jaw clenched. The cold bit into his face, sharper now that his blood had cooled. How long has the council been waiting? He asked. Nearly an hour, Highness, the rider said. The king was most insistent. He ordered that you be found at once wherever you were. Of course he did, Leopold thought. The council, his father, his first marriage. Clara vanishing up the path while he stood here like a fool between two roads. He stared at the curve where she had disappeared. "Did anyone follow me from the square?" he asked quietly. "Only your guards, Highness," one of them replied. "We kept our distance as ordered. Did you see the woman I was with?" Both guards shifted uneasily. "Yes, Highness," the older one said. "Some in the square saw too." Leopold nodded once. It was done then. There would be talk long before he set foot in the council chamber. He straightened, as if putting on armor. "Very well. We return to the palace." As he swung into the saddle, he told himself there would be time later. Time to walk this path again, time to knock on that cottage door, time to ask the questions burning in his chest. The horse turned, hooves crunching over frozen ruts. Innsbruck lay below, the palace rising beyond like a pale promise and a threat. Inside the council chamber, the air was warmer, but no less sharp. A fire burned low in the grate. The king sat at the head of the long table, hands folded, his expression hard to read. On either side, ministers and advisers in dark coats waited, faces solemn. Leopold entered, bowing slightly. Snow still clung to the hem of his cloak. "You sent for me, father," he said. "I did." King Wilhelm's voice was cool. "Sit." Leopold took the chair opposite him. He glanced around the table and met the eyes of Count von Hohenberg, the chief minister. Hohenberg's gaze slid away with practiced politeness. "Your behavior in the square has reached us faster than my summons reached you," the king said. "You left your fiancée standing alone." Leopold's fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. "I wished to speak to someone." "A peasant woman," one of the older ministers said. "A pregnant one." Leopold's head snapped toward him. "You speak as if that were a crime." "It is not the woman's state that concerns us," Hohenberg cut in smoothly. "It is the state of the prince. People saw you. They ask who she is, why you were so affected." King Wilhelm held up a hand. "We did not call you here to scold you for a misstep in a marketplace, though that misstep may cost us more than you realize. We called you because it appears fate has a sense of irony." Leopold forced his voice to stay level. "What do you mean?" The king looked to Hohenberg. "Explain." The minister folded his hands as if beginning a legal recital. "Your Highness, as you know, your first marriage was dissolved by annulment under church authority." Leopold's jaw tightened. "I know what I was told." Hohenberg inclined his head. "Recently, as we prepared documents for your wedding to Baron Adler's daughter, we reviewed all previous arrangements. It is routine. The Archbishop's office requested we send the original decree of annulment so that no question could ever be raised about the validity of your new union." "And?" Leopold asked. "And," Hohenberg said, "we discovered that some supporting documents are missing. Others lack certain seals. There are irregularities that, if examined too closely, might give malicious minds an excuse to mutter." The chamber felt smaller. "Irregularities," Leopold repeated. King Wilhelm shifted in his chair. "Your mother insisted we look into it before proceeding. She does not wish her future grandchildren to be targets of gossip about legitimacy and technicalities." Leopold's heart beat faster. "Are you telling me the annulment might not be valid?" Hohenberg lifted a shoulder. "We do not say that. The decree bears the Archbishop's signature. However, some papers that should accompany such a decree cannot be found. We are seeking replacements, confirmations, anything to close the gap." "And if you cannot?" Leopold asked. "Then it becomes a matter of interpretation," Hohenberg said. "Interpretation, Your Highness, is dangerous in such matters. It invites debate we cannot afford." The king leaned forward. "We will resolve it. Until then, we must proceed with extreme caution, especially now that you have been seen pursuing a woman who, to those who remember, resembles a certain former crown princess." Leopold stared at him. "You knew she was in Innsbruck?" "No," the king said. "We thought her gone from Tyrol. Her presence here is an unfortunate complication. You will not touch her," Leopold said quietly. Hohenberg smiled thinly. "No one spoke of touching anyone, Highness." "You know what I mean," Leopold snapped. "No visits from officials, no threats, no encouragement to disappear. She has already suffered enough for the sake of this court." The ministers shifted. The king's gaze sharpened. "You speak as if we were her jailers." "You were," Leopold said. "We all were, I as much as anyone." Silence spread across the table. Hohenberg cleared his throat. "We are not here to assign blame for the past. We are here to protect the future. The Adler alliance is essential. Tensions with the southern duchies grow each year. Baron Adler's support keeps them in check. Leopold's hands curled into fists on his knees. And the price is my honesty? My conscience? Again? The price, Hohenberg said evenly, is stability, as it was when we arranged for your annulment. It was not done lightly. Explain that to me, Leopold said suddenly. Explain it at last. No more hints. No more vague talk of grave reasons. I am not a child. The king's face tightened, but he nodded once. Very well. Since fate has dragged this into the open, we will speak plainly. Hohenberg hesitated, then began. From the first, the council opposed your marriage to Fräulein Weiss. Your father gave reluctant consent because you were insistent. Because I loved her, Leopold said. Hohenberg's mouth thinned. Call it as you wish. You were determined. The council feared the reaction of other houses. A commoner as crown princess, it offended families whose support we needed. We advised delay. You refused. Leopold remembered those arguments well. The slammed doors, the late-night conversations with his mother, the tight anger in his father's voice. After the wedding, Hohenberg went on, we waited, we watched. Months passed. There was no sign of an heir. Whispers began. Certain physicians close to the court were asked for their opinion. Certain physicians, Leopold repeated. Not her own father. Hohenberg's eyes flickered. Her father was hardly impartial, and he was ill himself at that time. You told me that after, Leopold said quietly. The king shifted. Your father-in-law was not willing to speak plainly. Others were. Reports reached us suggesting that there might be difficulties. Leopold's teeth ground together. What difficulties? You know the language they use, Hohenberg said. Insufficient signs of fruitfulness, a frail constitution, a womb that might never carry to term. Such things. Leopold felt a flush of fury. She was young. We had barely been married a year. In royal years, a year is long, one minister muttered. Leopold turned on him. She was my wife, and you were our only heir, King Wilhelm said, weariness creeping into his tone. If there were doubts, we had to address them. There were also political concerns. Her family had no power, no lands, no alliances, only a respected name and a little learning. It was not enough. So you decided to erase her, Leopold said. We decided, Hohenberg said, to ask the church to examine whether the marriage had been entered into under proper conditions. There were questions. Did you fully understand the responsibilities? Was there undue influence? Were there impediments not considered? In such matters there can be grounds for annulment. And did the church find those grounds? Leopold asked. Hohenberg's gaze slid away. The church signed the decree. That is not an answer, Leopold said. The investigation was discreet, Hohenberg said. Not all documents are stored here. Some lie in diocesan archives. It is possible that certain records were misplaced. Leopold's fingers dug into the wood of the chair. You forced her out on the basis of papers you cannot even find. Hohenberg frowned. No one forced her. She agreed that stepping aside was best for the realm. She agreed, Leopold repeated, with half a dozen powerful men in a room telling her it was the only way to spare her family from disgrace. The king's mouth tightened. You were not in that room. No, Leopold said bitterly. You sent for her alone. The memory stabbed him. A servant's message, his wife called to speak with the council about household matters. Her pale face when she returned hours later, lips pressed together, eyes haunted. The way she had kissed his hands that night, too many times as if memorizing the feel. He had asked what had been said. She had smiled, shaken her head, told him not to worry. 2 days later, she was gone. You think we enjoyed it? The king asked. You think I wanted my son's marriage undone? We did what duty demanded. Duty, Leopold echoed. The word tasted like ash. And now that duty returns to trouble you. Hohenberg spread his hands. We must not let this irregularity destroy our work. We will obtain proper confirmations from the archbishop, discreetly. Until then you will avoid public entanglements, especially with this woman. Leopold's gaze snapped to him. Say her name. It is not necessary. Say it, Leopold said. You have dictated her life. You can at least speak her name. Hohenberg's jaw clenched. Very well. Fräulein Clara Weiss, are you satisfied? No, Leopold said, but I am done listening for now. He stood. The king's eyes narrowed. Where are you going? To do what I should have done years ago, Leopold said. To hear the truth from the only person who has paid the full price for your decisions. Hohenberg half rose. Highness, you cannot simply... Leopold looked down the table, his voice low but steady. I will be back before dawn. If there are to be discussions about my future, they will include my past. All of it. The king studied him, then gave a short, reluctant nod. Go. But take care. You walk on thin ice, my son. Leopold met his gaze. I have been on thin ice since the day you annulled my marriage. He left the chamber before anyone could answer. Night fell quickly over the town. By the time Leopold left the palace in a plain cloak, the lamps in the streets had been lit. He took only one trusted guard and dismissed him at the edge of the poorer quarter. I will go on alone, he said. Highness, it is not... It is my order, Leopold said. Stay where you are. I will return. The guard bowed stiffly and stepped back into the shadows. Leopold followed the path he had taken earlier that day, though now the square was quieter, the stalls dark. A few figures moved through the cold, hunched against the wind. No one gave him more than a passing glance. The cloak hid his rank well enough. The climb up the mountain path seemed longer in the dark. Lantern light flickered in cottage windows. A dog barked somewhere, then fell silent. He found her house more by memory than by sight. A low roof, a crooked chimney, a small pile of wood by the door. Light glowed faintly from within. Leopold hesitated, hand raised. For a moment, fear held him. Not fear of scandal, but of what she would say. What she would see when she looked at him. He knocked. There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps. The latch lifted. The door opened a narrow span. Clara peered out, a shawl around her shoulders. When she saw him, her mouth tightened. I told you not to come, she said. You did, he answered. I came anyway. She pushed the door wider reluctantly. You should not be seen here at this hour. No one followed me, he said. You are a prince, she replied. Someone is always following you. You just do not see them. He stepped inside. The room was small but neat. A fire burned low in the hearth. A plain table stood to one side, with folded linen piled upon it. A narrow bed, a wooden chest, a single chair. It was hardly more than a single room with corners. He took it in with one sweep of his eyes. You live here? Yes. She closed the door. Do not look at it as if you expected silk on the walls. I expected nothing, he said. I had no idea where you were, or if you were. She moved past him to the table. Say what you came to say, Leopold. Then go. He looked at the folded linens, tiny shirts, small caps, little socks. His throat tightened. You are prepared, he said softly. I have had months, she replied. He turned to her. Whose are they? Her jaw clenched. Mine. You know what I mean, he said. Whose child are you carrying? She picked up one of the shirts, smoothing it between fingers that were a little rougher than he remembered. Is that why you came? To accuse me of some impropriety? To satisfy the council that their former mistake will not trouble them? I came to know the truth, he said. No one in that palace ever gave it to me. Not about you. Not about the annulment. Not about anything that mattered. She looked up sharply. They spoke of the annulment. There are irregularities, he said. Missing papers. Seals that may not have been properly affixed. They want to hide it. I want to understand it. Her eyes darkened. Irregularities. That is a neat word for what they did. What did they do? He asked. She sank onto the lone chair, leaning back a little, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Her breath came slowly. You really wish to know? She asked. Yes, he said. They came to me one morning, she began. Not your father, not your mother, not you. Just the minister, the chancellor, a churchman I had never seen before. They asked if I was happy. They asked if I felt suited into life at court. They asked if the burden was not too great. Leopold's hands curled. And you said? I said I had married you. Not the court, she said, voice steady. That the burden was bearable because you were kind. They smiled at that in a way that did not reach their eyes. She paused, glanced at him. Do you remember the rumors? The ones about my... supposed barrenness. Yes, he said. They told me they had consulted doctors, she went on, that there was reason to think I would never carry a child to term, that my health was weak, that my body was unsuited to the strain of repeated pregnancies, that if I stayed, the kingdom might never see another heir. Leopold felt sick. No doctor ever examined you, he said hoarsely. Not with my knowledge. I know, she said. That is why I asked for names, for details. They would not give them. They only said the matter was settled. And you believed them? He asked. She looked down at her hands. I believed that they were powerful men who could ruin my family with a word. They told me your position was already weakened by marrying me. They said foreign courts mocked you, that the nobles here were angry, that if I stayed, resentment would fall not only on me but on you, on my father, on my brother. They spoke of investigations into my family's finances, into my father's medical practice. They hinted at charges, negligence, fraud. Leopold's vision blurred for a moment. They threatened you, he said. They suggested outcomes, she said. Then they offered a way to avoid them. If I agreed that the marriage had been a mistake, if I testified that I had never truly been capable of acting as your wife should, that I had never fully consented to such a heavy responsibility, then the church could find grounds to annul, quietly, without scandal. My father would be left alone. My brother would keep his apprenticeship. You would be free to marry someone more suitable. He stared at her, words gone. I asked if you knew, she said. They said you were not to be troubled, that your health was fragile, that a prolonged dispute might worsen it. They looked at me as if I were selfish for even mentioning you. I was not told, he whispered. I guessed as much, she said. You would have fought. Not hard enough, he said. Clara's gaze softened for a heartbeat. You were surrounded. They know how to bind a prince with silk. They are experts at it. What did you do? He asked. What could I do? She replied. I signed what they put in front of me. They had already written the words. I only had to trace my name at the bottom. They said it would be sent to the archbishop, that he would confirm it, that a decree would arrive, and in a few months it would be as if the marriage had never existed. He swallowed. You left 2 days later. Yes, she said. They told me to. They had a carriage prepared. They suggested a convent at first. I refused. Why? He asked. Because I had not lied in everything I signed, she said quietly. I had withheld one truth. He stared. What truth? She looked directly at him now, and there was no bitterness in her eyes, only a kind of tired triumph. That I was late, she said. Very late. That I had already begun to suspect the doctors were wrong about me. His heart gave a strange, painful leap. You were... Barely, she said. Weeks, perhaps. I did not know for certain. I told no one, not even my father, certainly not your ministers. They would have found some way to twist it, to claim it was false or dangerous or something. I kept it to myself. And then? He asked. Then I left, she said simply. By the time I was sure, it was too late to go back. The decree had been announced. You were told I had agreed. The court began pretending I had never existed. And I realized something. What? He asked. That they were fools, she said. They had gone to such trouble to rid themselves of a barren wife that they had not even waited long enough to see if I truly was barren. They built their whole lie on a foundation that changed under their feet the moment they turned their backs. He stared at her stomach. How long? He asked. How many months now? 7, she said quietly. 7. The number slammed into him. He counted back mentally. 7 months. Long after she had left. But the first missed month would have been before the carriage, before the signatures, before the decree. Do you see why I laughed when you asked whose child this is? She asked gently. He nodded slowly, as if afraid to move too fast in case the fragile sense of reality shattered. Yes, he said. I see. She watched him. You still have not told me why you came now. Not in years past, when I might have needed a friend more than ever. I thought... He dragged a hand through his hair. I thought you were gone. They told me you were removed, settled in a distant house. Then they stopped mentioning you at all. When I asked, they said it was better for everyone if I did not dwell on the past. I let myself believe that forgetting would hurt less than fighting. And now? She asked. Now I know that forgetting hurt you far more than fighting would have hurt me, he said, and I cannot bear that. She exhaled, some tension leaving her shoulders. The past is done. Not entirely, he said. There is something else. He reached into his cloak and drew out a folded parchment, its edges worn, its ink faded. Clara's eyes widened when she saw it. You have it, she whispered. You recognize it, he asked. I held it once, she said. Only briefly, before I signed. I was not meant to keep it. How did you— It was in the council archives, he said, mixed with other petitions. Someone filed it in the wrong place, or hid it there. He unfolded it on the table. They both leaned over it. Her unfamiliar words stared up at them, written in a hand that was not hers but with her name at the bottom. Here, he said, pointing to the top. The date. She frowned. Yes, that was the day they came to me. No, he said quietly. Look again. This date is 3 weeks earlier than the day they spoke to you. Earlier than you signed. Earlier than you suspected anything. It is the date they claim you confessed your unfitness. Her eyes flicked across the lines. Her breath caught. That cannot be right. The Chancellery clerk confirmed it, he said. The decree they showed you later bears this date. It means the annulment was written, signed, and set in motion before they ever spoke a word to you, before they asked for your consent, before they told me there would be an investigation. She put a trembling finger on the number. So when they sat in that room and told me it was not yet decided, they were lying. Yes, he said, it was decided long before. You were never a participant, only a formality, a signature they needed to justify what they had already done. Clara sank back in the chair, one hand on her stomach, the other still touching the paper. I suppose I always suspected. But seeing it, Leopold's vision narrowed to the crisp ink strokes that spelled out the date. He felt as if the ground shifted under him. Do you know what this means? He said slowly. If this date is true, then the conditions they claimed as grounds, your supposed confession, your supposed uncertainty, all of it is false in the record. A lie. And if the process was built on a lie— He broke off, breath shallow. Clara looked up. What does it mean? He met her gaze, the weight of it settling fully on his shoulders for the first time. The thought struck him like a blow. If this date was true, then in the eyes of God and the law he was still married to Clara, even as the court prepared his wedding to another woman. For a long moment, Leopold could not speak. The little room seemed to tilt. The fire, the low ceiling, the folded baby linens, Clara's hand on her stomach, all of it blurred at the edges. Still married, she repeated slowly. Leopold, do not say such things lightly. I am not saying them lightly, he managed. I am not even certain yet. But if the council wrote this before you ever spoke, if they lied about the grounds, then the decree may not be valid in the eyes of the church. And in the eyes of the court, she asked. He let out a breath that felt like it scraped his lungs. In the eyes of the court, whatever is convenient is valid. Until it is not. And your fiancé? Clara's voice was quiet, but the question struck. He thought of Friedrich, standing in the square, alone, the crowd watching. She deserves honesty, he said, more than anyone has given you or me. Clara's gaze dropped to the parchment again. I did not ask for this, Leopold. I know, he said. Neither did I. But it has found us anyway. A log in the hearth shifted, sending up a small shower of sparks. She flinched at the sound, one hand pressing more firmly to her side. Are you in pain? He asked quickly. Only tired, she said. The child has strong opinions about the way I sit. Something like wary pride flickered in her tone. He felt his chest tighten. How do you live? He asked. Who helps you? Hans mentioned a brother. He helps when he can, she said. He works at a sawmill now. There was no place for him at court once I fell from favor. Father is gone. We manage. I sew, I wash, I do odd work. Carrying wood, he said. Carrying wood, she agreed. He looked around again, taking in the thinness of the blankets, the patched garments. Anger rose in him cold and hard. I will not allow this, he said. She gave him a tired look. Allow what? That life is hard for those without titles? That the world forgets quickly? It already happened. I cannot go back to the palace and pretend I did not see you, he said, that I did not hear this, that I do not know about the child. "The palace has always been good at pretending," she said. "You learned from the best." He winced. She saw it and sighed. "I should not have said that," she murmured. "You did suffer too, not as I did, but in your own way, I know that." He sank onto the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "I let them tell me what was possible. I let them decide what I could bear. They groomed you for that since you were a boy," she said, "to think in duties, not desires. You were both," he said, "duty and desire. That was the miracle, and I let them rip it apart like a torn banner." She was silent. He straightened. "I must speak to someone in the church," he said. "Someone I trust. Someone who is not entangled with the council." "Is there such a person?" she asked doubtfully. "Perhaps," he said. "My old tutor, Father Matthias. He is no great figure, but he has a stubborn conscience." "And if he tells you the annulment is still valid?" she asked. "Then I will know," he said, "even if knowing cuts." He hesitated. "And if he tells me it is not?" She lifted her chin. "If he tells you it is not, the whole kingdom could be thrown into confusion. You know that." He nodded. "Yes, they will not let that happen easily," she said. "No," he said again. "They will not." Her gaze searched his. "What do you plan to do, Leopold?" "Tonight." He stood. "Get back to the palace before they send half the guard searching for me." "Tomorrow?" "I do not know. But I will not leave you in this cottage, carrying the weight of their lie alone." "I have done so for months," she said. "And you should not have had to," he replied. He folded the parchment carefully and slipped it back into his cloak. "May I keep it?" she asked suddenly. He hesitated. "It may be needed as evidence." "It is part of my life," she said. "It carries my name, and that date. If it vanishes back into their archives, they can pretend again." He weighed that, then took her hand, turned it palm up, and placed the folded paper into it. "Keep it hidden," he said. "If anyone comes asking, say you lost it." She smiled faintly. "You underestimate me. If anyone comes asking, I will say I have nothing, and they will believe a woman like me has lost everything she was given." He did not trust his voice, so he only nodded. At the door, he paused. "Clara." "Yes?" "Whatever happens," he said, I am glad you are alive." Tears glimmered briefly in her eyes, then vanished. "Do not say that as if it were a small thing," she murmured. "It has not always felt certain." He stepped out into the night, closing the door gently behind him. The walk back to the palace felt longer. By the time he crossed the courtyard, the sky was paling with the first hint of dawn. Inside, servants moved quietly, surprised to see him in a simple cloak, hair damp with melted snow. Word travelled ahead of him. When he reached his apartments, Friedrich was already waiting in the outer salon, fully dressed, despite the early hour. She stood by the window, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Where have you been?" she asked without preamble. He stopped. "Good morning to you as well." She turned. Her composure was intact, but her eyes betrayed that she had slept little. "Do not jest with me," she said. "You left me in the square. You disappeared for hours. The court is buzzing like a hive." "I'm sorry," he said. "I should not have left you like that." "No," she said. "You should not." Her gaze swept over his damp cloak. "You went to her. There was no point in lying." "Yes." "And?" Friedrich asked. "And she is not a rumor," he said quietly. "She is a woman trying to survive winter with a child on the way." Friedrich's lips tightened. "Is the child yours?" He hesitated. "Answer me," she pressed. "Do not treat me as fragile." "I am not. I do not know with certainty," he said, which was both honest and evasive. "But the timing makes it likely." She let out a small breath and turned away, as if steadying herself on the window frame. "When people spoke of your first marriage," she said slowly, "they always did so as if it were an unfortunate mistake. Brief, embarrassing, best forgotten. I told myself it was over, that I was not stepping into anyone's place, but in the square yesterday," she shook her head, "you looked like a man seeing his life return to him." He could not deny it. "It was a shock. That much even the fishmongers understood," she said with a brittle hint of humor. "Friedrich," he began. She held up a hand. "No explanations. Not yet. I did not ask to be entangled in this. My father seeks an alliance. Your father seeks the same. I am simply the most convenient bridge between them. You are more than that, he said. Am I? She asked softly. Would you have chosen me if there had never been a council, never been an annulment, never been this woman they call Clara Weiss? He hesitated, then answered honestly, I do not know. Her eyes shimmered for a moment, then cleared. Thank you for at least not lying, she said. Few men in this palace can manage that. He stepped closer. You deserve better than to be misled. I deserve a husband whose soul is not bound elsewhere, she said. Or no husband at all. But what I deserve has never been of great interest to the men at that council table. He thought of her father, of Baron Adler's broad, calculating face. What has he said? Nothing yet, she said. He is waiting to see whether this will blow over, whether you will come crawling with apologies, whether he must be offended on my behalf or remain serenely above it. I will speak to him, Leopold said. You will speak to the king first, she replied. He summoned you again. He sent me to wait for you. I suppose he thinks I can steady you, as if I were a piece of furniture. You are not furniture, he said. That is kind of you, she murmured. Go then. I will not stand between you and your duty. He hesitated. Friedrich, I never wished to humiliate you. That is almost funny, she said quietly, because humiliation is precisely what I felt yesterday, but perhaps that is not entirely your fault. She stepped aside, signaling the end of the conversation. He left, feeling her gaze on his back. In the king's study, the mood was different from the formal chill of the council chamber. Papers lay scattered on the desk. A carafe of untouched coffee sat to one side. King Wilhelm looked older than he had the night before. You went back to her, he said without greeting. Yes, Leopold answered. Alone, at night, without proper escort, the king went on. I took care, Leopold said. Care? The king repeated. You think gossip cares whether you took care? The whole town is already telling the story in 10 different versions. Some have you dragging her into an alley. Others have you naming her child as heir on the spot. It is absurd. The truth is simpler and worse, Leopold said. The king's eyes narrowed. Explain. She told me what happened in that room when they convinced her to sign, Leopold said. How they threatened her family. How they lied about doctors' reports. How they claimed there would be an investigation when in fact, he pulled in a breath, when in fact the annulment had already been drawn up. The king's gaze flicked to the parchment still faintly visible under Leopold's cloak. You have seen the draft? Yes, Leopold said. The date at the top. It is weeks earlier than the day they spoke to her, earlier than you informed me, earlier than anything. The king closed his eyes briefly. I suspected as much. Hohenberg has a habit of arranging outcomes and then staging the discussions afterward. It gives everyone the illusion of choice. Did you know, Leopold asked, that they lied to her? I knew they were forceful, the king said. I allowed it. I will not pretend innocence. I told myself it was for the good of the kingdom, that a sacrifice had to be made, and that she was young enough to start again elsewhere. I did not dwell on the details. And you call that duty? Leopold said, anger flaring. What would you call it? The king snapped. You think ruling is done with clean hands? You think there are choices that do not cost someone something? You were the heir. Your marriage was not a private affair. It was policy. I failed you by letting you marry her in the first place. When it began to threaten everything, I failed her by tearing you apart. There. Does that satisfy your hunger for confession? Leopold stared at him, surprised by the harsh honesty. No, he said quietly, but it is more than I expected. The king sagged slightly in his chair. We cannot remake the past. We must decide what to do now. The archbishop has sent word. He has agreed to review the matter personally, in private. He will arrive within the week. And until then, Leopold asked. Until then, you will keep away from her, the king said. No, Leopold said. The king's gaze snapped up. You dare defy me so openly? Yes, Leopold said. I will not abandon her again. Not while she is carrying a child that might be mine. That might be... He stopped himself too late. The king went very still. What did you say? Leopold exhaled. She is with child. 7 months. She was already late when they forced her to sign. She suspected even then. She told no one. Not you. Not the council. Not me. The king's face drained of color. Dear God. Is that not what you wanted? Leopold asked bitterly. An heir? Not like this, the king muttered. He pushed a hand through his thinning hair. If what you say is true, it is, Leopold said. I have no reason to doubt her. She has had every reason to hate me, and she has not lied. The king stood and began to pace the small space. If the annulment is found invalid, if the child is yours, then the situation is complicated. Leopold laughed without humor. That is a very mild word. You are formally betrothed to another, the king said. The Adlers expect a wedding. Our enemies watch for any weakness. If they smell scandal in our succession, they will exploit it. And what would you have me do? Leopold demanded. Pretend the child does not exist. Pretend my vows to Clara never existed. Marry Friedrich and let Clara freeze in that cottage with a bastard the court whispers about? Do not use that word, the king snapped. Not about your own possible offspring. Then do not ask me to behave as if it were true, Leopold shot back. A knock on the door interrupted them. The king glared at it. What now? Enter, he barked. Father Matthias stepped in, cap in his hands, eyes downcast. He was a small man, grey at the temples, with a walk that still bore traces of the military before he had taken vows. Your Majesty, Your Highness, he said, bowing to each in turn. I was sent for. Leopold's shoulders loosened a fraction. I asked him to come, he said to the king. If we are to drag the church into this again, I want a man present whose conscience I trust. The king eyed the priest, then waved him closer. Very well. Speak freely, Father. This room has heard enough lies for a lifetime. Father Matthias glanced between them, sensing the charged air. I will try, sire. Leopold motioned him to a chair. You were present at my wedding, he said. And at some of the discussions afterward. You heard talk of the annulment. Yes, Father Matthias said slowly. I heard. What did you think? Leopold asked. The priest hesitated. May I speak as I would to a penitent? Plainly. That is exactly what I want, Leopold said. Father Matthias folded his hands. From the first I was uneasy, he said. Annulments are not impossible, but they require clear grounds, consanguinity, coercion, incapacity, prior vows, things that can be demonstrated. In your case, the grounds seemed stretched. They told me there were doubts about her health, Leopold said, about her ability to bear children. I heard that too, the priest said. But I saw no examinations. I saw no sworn testimony, only hearsay from doctors who were very friendly with certain ministers. It troubled me. Did you see the full file? Leopold asked. No, Father Matthias said. That is part of what troubled me. I asked the Archbishop's office for copies. They sent a polite refusal. I was told the matter was sealed. In my experience, sealed matters are often those that would not bear much light. The king frowned. Why did you not speak of this earlier? I did, the priest said mildly. To your Majesty, in cautious terms. I was told the decision had been made and that revisiting it would only reopen wounds. I am a simple priest, sire. I do not command armies. I counsel, and I was not heeded. Leopold leaned forward. If the Archbishop reviews the case now, what might he find? That depends on what records he truly has, Father Matthias said. If he discovers that the testimony was fabricated, that the bride was threatened, that consent was not freely given, then he might well rule that the annulment was never valid in the spiritual sense. The sacrament would stand. And the law? Leopold asked. The law will twist to follow the stronger force, the priest said dryly. If the king accepts such a ruling, many will fall in line. If he rejects it, many will pretend not to have heard it. The king grimaced. You make it sound so grubby. Law is a human thing, sire, Father Matthias said. Sacraments are not. That is why they trouble men who prefer clear chains of command. Leopold drew in a breath. There is another matter. Clara is with child. Father Matthias's brows rose. Ah, she was likely already with child when she signed, Leopold said. Though she did not know for certain. The child will be born under the shadow of this confusion. The priest's gaze sharpened. When is it due? Within 2 months, Leopold said. She is 7 months along. Father Matthias did a quick count on his fingers, lips moving silently. Then he looked up, eyes keen. And when did she leave the palace? He asked. Nearly 9 months ago, Leopold said. The day after they forced her to sign. Why? Again the priest counted, more slowly this time. Forgive the bluntness, Highness. When did you last share a bed as husband and wife? Leopold flushed but answered. In the weeks before they called her to that meeting, we were not distant. There was no separation. Then it is simple, Father Matthias said quietly. Unless she took another husband in the woods on the ride away from this city, the child is yours. Leopold's heart pounded. But the timing. The timing places conception squarely within your marriage, the priest said, before any decree. Even if the annulment were valid, and I doubt it, the child was conceived when the bond was unquestioned. That makes a difference in canon law and in custom. The king sank back, face pale. In plain words, Father. The priest looked from father to son. In plain words, sire, if the sacrament stands and the child is indeed the prince's, then that child is legitimate in the eyes of the church. And given the rules of succession you yourselves have sworn to uphold, that would make him not only your grandson, but the rightful heir to your throne. The word heir lay in the air like a stone dropped into a still pool. The king was the first to move. He reached for the back of his chair, fingers gripping the carved wood. You are certain, he asked Father Matthias, that the church would see it so? As certain as any man can be when speaking of canon law, the priest replied. Dates matter, intent matters. If the child was conceived within a valid marriage, the child is lawful, even if men later made mistakes or sinned in undoing what should not have been undone. Leopold stared at the floor. He saw only Clara's small house, the patched blankets, the way her hand had curved over her stomach when she spoke. An heir born in a mountain cottage, the king muttered, because my ministers were in a hurry to erase a girl they never bothered to understand. Father Matthias bowed his head. Sire, forgiveness is possible for all of us. The king let out a breath. I am not thinking of forgiveness. I am thinking of consequences. If we acknowledge this child, we must also acknowledge the lie that led to his mother's disgrace. The Adlers will rage. Our enemies will crow. Hohenberg will say the realm cannot bear such turmoil. What does your conscience say, Father? Leopold asked suddenly. The priest looked at him. My conscience says that truth has been waiting patiently outside your doors, Highness. It is weary of being made to stand in the cold. Leopold raised his eyes to his father. And yours? The king sat down again heavily. For a time he did not answer. When he did, his voice was rough. My conscience is old, he said. It has grown used to being ignored. But even old things can wake. I have lived long enough to see that every compromise we make with truth returns later, larger and uglier. He rubbed his forehead. I do not wish to leave that as your inheritance. Leopold said nothing, but something in his shoulders eased. We summon Baron Adler, the king went on. Today, he will not like what he hears, but he will hear it from us, not from gossip in the market. And you, Leopold, will speak for yourself. I will, Leopold said. Father Matthias shifted. Sire, if I may, the woman at the center of this has not been asked what she wants. Again, Leopold nodded quickly. He is right. You speak of heirs and alliances, Father, but Clara is the one who must live with whatever we decide in these rooms. I will not drag her back to the palace as a piece in your game. The king looked tired. What do you suggest? That we protect her first, Leopold said, publicly if need be, that no one can accuse her of anything. Then we can speak of thrones. Father Matthias inclined his head. The gospel does not command kings to be clever first. It commands them to be just. The king gave a faint, crooked smile. You always were an inconvenient priest. His gaze hardened. Send for Hohenberg, and for Baron Adler. If we are to pull this knot, we may as well see how tightly it was tied. By midday, the council chamber buzzed again. Baron Adler arrived in a swirl of heavy coat and wounded dignity, his daughter beside him. Friedrich walked with her head high, eyes calm, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her mind all morning. Hohenberg came last, composed as ever. If he was troubled, he hid it behind the careful blandness of his expression. The king did not sit at the long table this time. Instead, he stood at its head, one hand resting on the polished surface. This is not a formal council, he said. This is a reckoning. Hohenberg's smile was thin. Reckoning, sire? Yes, the king said. About a marriage, an annulment, and the consequences of decisions made in this room some years ago. Sit, they obeyed. Leopold took a seat near the center, Friedrich across from him. Their eyes met briefly. She gave the slightest of nods as if to say, I am ready. Are you? Baron Adler, the king began, there are matters you must hear before we speak further of weddings. The baron's jaw flexed. If this concerns yesterday's incident in the square, sire, I assure you, my daughter, this is older than yesterday, the king cut in. Older even than your daughter's betrothal. It concerns my son's first marriage. A faint ripple moved around the table. Hohenberg's gaze sharpened. The annulment, he asked. Yes, the king said. We have discovered irregularities. The archbishop has agreed to review them. We do not yet know what he will decide, but there is a real possibility that the annulment will be declared invalid. Baron Adler frowned. I do not understand. You speak as if the prince might still be bound to that woman. He might be, Leopold said quietly. All eyes swung to him, Friedrich's included. And if that is so, the king continued, forcing each word, then our plans for a new marriage cannot proceed. Whatever my personal wishes, I cannot bless a second union if there is doubt about the first. Colour rose in Baron Adler's cheeks. Sire, we negotiated in good faith. We were led to believe the prince was free. You ask us to withdraw now and bear the shame alone? You will not bear it alone, the king said. If there is shame here, it is my own and my counsel's. We were too ready to accept convenient reports, too eager to restore political comfort at the cost of one woman's honor. Hohenberg cleared his throat. Your Majesty, with respect, revisiting this now could destabilize everything we have built. The southern duchies— I am aware of the duchies, the king snapped. I am also aware that you pushed this annulment through in unseemly haste. Hohenberg stiffened. I acted in the kingdom's best interest. You acted according to your own fears, the king said, and I allowed it because they matched my own. Let us not dress cowardice in the garments of wisdom, Count. Hohenberg's lips thinned. If the archbishop questions the decree, we can still argue that the civil effects stand, that the prince is free in law if not in— No, Leopold said. Every head turned again. No more tricks, he went on. No more half-truths. If the church declares that Clara is still my wife, then she is my wife. In God's eyes, at least. I refuse to behave as if two truths can coexist. And what if the archbishop says otherwise? Hohenberg challenged. What if he confirms the annulment? Then I will accept it, Leopold said. I will grieve and accept. But until he speaks, I will not treat Clara as an inconvenience to be hidden. Baron Adler bristled. And what of my daughter? Is she to be put back on the shelf like an unsuitable trinket while you sort your conscience? Friedrich spoke before Leopold could. Father. Her tone silenced him. She rose, smoothing her skirts, and faced the king first. May I have leave to speak, your majesty? She asked. You may, the king said. She inclined her head. I entered this betrothal knowing I would be judged as an ornament of state. A bridge between houses. I accepted that. I did not expect to be the cause of injustice to another woman, nor the reward for deceit carried out before I even met the prince. Baron Adler frowned. You were promised— I was promised very little that concerned my own happiness, she said, still calm. Only your satisfaction, and perhaps a tiara. A few of the older ministers shifted, uncomfortable. Hohenberg stared at the table. Friedrich turned to Leopold. You wronged me yesterday, she said. You left me in public without explanation. You humiliated me, however, unintentionally. I know, he said, and I am sorry. I believe you, she said, but your greater wrong was done before I ever arrived. It was done to Clara Weiss. You owe her the chance to see that wrong faced. He searched her face. You say this knowing what it may cost you. Yes, she said simply, because I have watched my mother for years, living with a man she does not like, tied to a bargain she did not make. I will not step willingly into that same quiet misery. Baron Adler's face darkened. Friedrich, you forget yourself. No, father, she said. For the first time, I remember myself. The room went still. She returned her gaze to the king. If the annulment is found invalid, I ask that you release me from this betrothal. If it is found valid, we may speak again, but only if the prince's heart is free, as well as his hand. That is not how alliances work, Baron Adler protested. "That is how my life will work," she said. King Wilhelm studied her. "You realize, Baron, that a daughter who can speak so to a king would make a formidable ally, even without a ring on her finger." Baron Adler swallowed. "Sire, You were wronged too," the king said more gently. "I misled you by omission. For that I apologize, publicly if need be. But I will not command my son to marry a woman while he wonders if he still has a wife living in poverty a few miles away, nor will I bind your daughter to a man in such torment." Baron Adler breathed hard through his nose. "If we withdraw, we lose face," he muttered. "Not if it is framed as your choice," the king said. "You may say your daughter is too proud to accept a husband under a cloud. Many will admire her, and you." Friedrich glanced at her father. "There are worse things than the loss of face," she said softly. "There is the loss of respect for oneself." Baron Adler looked between his daughter, the prince, and the king. Politics ran calculations behind his eyes. Finally, his shoulders slumped a fraction. "Very well," he said. "On the condition that no one in this court ever suggests that my daughter was cast aside, we withdraw. We do not get thrown away." The king inclined his head. "Agreed." Hohenberg cleared his throat. "Sire, if I may—" "No," the king said without looking at him. "You may not. You have guided my son's life according to your fears for long enough. Consider yourself relieved of some of your duties until this is resolved." The word relieved hit Hohenberg harder than any shouted accusation. His eyes widened. "Sire, you cannot simply—" "I can," the king said, "and I have. You will retain your title, but others will speak for the realm at the archbishop's table, men who were not so eager to clear their desks of a difficult case." Father Matthias bowed his head slightly, a glint in his eyes. Hohenberg rose stiffly. "If the duchies smell weakness, they will smell something else," the king snapped. "A house that cleans its own stables. Go, Count. Spend some time considering the difference between prudence and cruelty." Hohenberg's jaw worked, but he bowed and left, his coat flaring behind him. When the door closed, the room felt easier to breathe in. Friedrika sat down again. Her hands trembled slightly now that the moment had passed. Leopold leaned forward. "I did not expect you to defend Clara," he said quietly. "I did not do it for her alone," she replied. "I did it because I could not bear the thought of being part of your forgetting." He flinched at the word. "I never truly forgot." "Then prove it to her," Friedrich said, "and to yourself, and to this court." Baron Adler muttered something about idealism and youth, but he did not contradict her. King Wilhelm looked at Leopold. "You wish to make things right. This is your chance. You have my consent to speak openly with Clara. She will be protected. No more secret summonses. No more veiled threats." "And the child?" Leopold asked. "The child will be protected as well," the king said. "We will not let ministers or gossips decide his worth. Only truth will do that." Leopold drew a long breath. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," the king said. "You will have harder conversations than this. One of them will be with the woman you once loved and then lost. Another will be with the man you used to be." Later, in a quieter corridor, Leopold caught up with Friedrich as she left with her father. "May I speak with you alone?" he asked. Baron Adler opened his mouth to object, but Friedrich touched his arm. "Please, father." He considered, then gave a grudging nod and walked ahead a little, just out of earshot. Leopold and Friedrich stood by a narrow window, the glass faintly fogged. "I'm sorry," he said again. "Words seem thin, but they are what I have now." She gave a small smile. "You are a prince. You have more than words. Do you hate me?" he asked. "No," she said. "I wish I could. It would be simpler, but I do not. I think you have been weak in ways that harmed others, and I think you are trying, slowly, painfully, to be less weak. I cannot hate that." He swallowed. "You deserved a man who looked at you the way I looked at her in the square." "I noticed," she said lightly. "It stung. It still does. But I would rather you look at someone that way than live beside me like a polite stranger." He laughed softly, without much joy. "You deserve better than a polite stranger." "We both did," she said. "Perhaps we will each find it in other ways." She tilted her head. "I am not entirely without charm, you know. Some other house will realize that. They would be fools not to," he said. Her eyes shone with brief warmth. "If we stood on different ground, Leopold, we might have made a decent life together." "Perhaps," he said, But you deserve more than decent. And you, she said, deserve a chance to fix the ending of your first story before you begin a second. They parted with a formal bow and curtsy, but there was an understanding between them that had not been there before, something like alliance, but of a quieter kind. That evening, as snow began to drift again over the town, Leopold returned once more to the mountain path. This time he did not hide behind a plain cloak. He wore simple clothes, but he kept the small crest at his collar. He wanted it known that the prince walked this way, so that any shadow watching would think twice. At the edge of the poorer quarter, he saw two unfamiliar riders lingering near the path. Their coats were fine, their horses too well fed for local men. He recognized the sly watchfulness in their posture. Hohenberg's eyes, he muttered. He approached them directly. "Is there some matter of state that brings you to this road?" he asked. They stiffened, surprised. One bowed awkwardly. "Your Highness, we were making certain the route is safe." "For whom?" he asked. "For any who pass, of course," the man said too quickly. Leopold held their gaze. "How you may tell Count von Hohenberg, if you are in his employ, that he no longer dictates where I walk or whom I visit. If any harm comes to a woman in a cottage up this path, I will know where to look first." The men swallowed, murmured assurances, and turned their horses away. Leopold watched until they were gone, then started up the slope. In the cabin, Clara was alone with a neighbor woman, Greta, who was mending a tear in a baby blanket. "You must let us help you more," Greta said. "It is not right for you to be alone so often, especially now." "I am not entirely alone," Clara answered, hand on her belly. "He makes his presence known." "Or she," Greta said. "Or she," Clara agreed, smiling faintly. A knock came. Greta looked up. "More wood already," she muttered, rising. But when she opened the door and saw Leopold, her mouth fell open. She dropped a quick curtsy, nearly tangling in her skirts. "Highness," she stammered. "Greta, please," Clara said. "Do not stand there freezing. Let him in if he must come." Greta moved aside, eyes wide. Leopold stepped in, bringing a gust of cold air with him. "I did not expect to find company," he said. "Greta knows more of my life than most," Clara replied. "She has earned the right not to be sent away like a servant when your Highness arrives." "I did not intend," he began. "I know," Clara said. "You rarely intend to hurt those beneath you. It simply happens as you move." Greta made a small choking sound, unsure whether to laugh. "Stay," Leopold told her gently. "I have no secrets from you that Clara would not already have shared." Clara's brows lifted. "You assume a great deal." "I have lost enough by not assuming anything," he said. "Today I will risk assumptions." Greta backed toward the hearth. "I can mend quietly," she offered. "I hear only what you do not care to keep within four walls." Leopold nodded, and Clara shrugged. "Very well," she said. "What brings your Highness again so soon? Did your council run out of ideas and send you back to the source of their trouble?" "In a way," he said, "things have changed." He told her then. Not every detail, but enough. The priest's judgment, the king's admission, the summoning of Adler, the breaking of the betrothal, Hohenberg's fall from favor. Clara listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "So," she said when he finished, "the castle trembles because they might have to admit that I was a wife after all. Because they must admit they lied," he said. "To you, to me, to the church." "And you?" she asked. "Does your world tremble, Leopold?" "Yes," he said simply. But perhaps it needed to. Greta shifted in her chair. "I will fetch water," she muttered, slipping out with the basin, giving them a measure of privacy. Leopold watched Clara. "You are not surprised." "I am tired of being surprised," she said. "If the Archbishop says the marriage stands, your father must drag his dignity through the mud. If he says it does not, then I must learn to see my life as a brief, foolish dream stamped invalid by a seal. Either way, I must rise the next day and feed a child." She smiled faintly. "I practice my calm." He took a breath. "I did something today I should have done long ago. I told the court I would not proceed with a new wedding while your place in my life remains unclear. I could have stayed silent and taken the easy path. I chose not to." "That is something," she said. "It is not everything," he replied. "Nothing I do now can erase what you endured. But I would not have you think I walk lightly away again." She watched him for a long moment. "What are you asking me, Leopold?" "Nothing," he said. "Not yet. The Archbishop has not spoken. The law still sits tangled. I came today not as a prince with answers, but as the man who broke your life to tell you that I am trying to mend what I can." Her eyes glistened briefly. She looked away toward the small window where snow drifted past. "Do you remember," she said, "the night we planted that little tree in the palace garden?" He blinked at the sudden turn. "Of course. You complained that the great oaks were too proud and old, that the earth needed something young. You said trees grow slowly," she recalled, "that we might never sit under its full shade. And I said that was the point, that some things we plant are for those who come after." He felt his throat tighten. "I went to see it after you left," he said. "Often. Hohenberg had half the garden redone. I thought they might dig it up, but he did not notice it. It is taller now, thin, a little crooked, but alive." Her mouth trembled. "Good. We cannot replant those years," he said softly. "But we can decide what grows from them. I do not know yet what you want from me, or if you want anything at all. But I needed you to know that I am no longer willing to let others choose for us in silence." She drew a slow breath, hand resting on the restless child under her ribs. "We will have to speak plainly some day soon," she said. "About pain, about blame, about whether there is anything left under all that ruin." "I know," he said. "I am ready when you are." "Not today," she said. "Today I am too tired to lift so much." He smiled faintly. "Then today I will simply sit, if you allow it, and carry the wood when it needs carrying, and perhaps fix that broken hinge on your door." She tilted her head. "A prince mending hinges. A man mending what his neglect left unfinished," he said. Greta came back in, cheeks red from the cold, and paused when she saw him sitting on the low stool by the hearth, his hands already reaching for the loose hinge. "Highness," she said cautiously, "if you fix that, you'll have to fix mine too. My door has squeaked for years." "I will bring oil," he said. Clara watched him with an expression that was not quite forgiveness, not yet, but no longer raw anger. Something in between. A space being cleared. In the palace that night, candles burned low in the king's study. He sat with Father Matthias, staring at the map of his realm. "If the duchies protest, let them," he said. "If the Adlers sulk, let them. I am tired of ruling by the least courageous voice in the room." "It is a good weariness," the priest said. "It may yet make a good king of your son." "And of me?" the king asked wryly. "It may make an honest old man of you," Father Matthias replied, "which is more than many get." Alone in his chamber later, Leopold looked out toward the dark line of the mountains. Somewhere up there, a small cabin held the people who now mattered more than any treaty. He thought of Friedrich's steady gaze, his father's weary confession, Clara's guarded calm, and the unborn child who had unknowingly pulled so many truths into the open. He turned from the window, knowing the next time he walked that mountain path, it would not be as a man half fleeing his own life, but as someone finally willing to stand still and hear whatever judgment the woman he had once loved chose to give him. The Archbishop arrived on a grey morning that smelled of thawing snow and wet stone. Leopold watched from an upper window as the carriage rolled into the courtyard. It was plain, almost austere, with only a small cross carved into the wood. The man who stepped out was not as grand as Leopold remembered from childhood ceremonies. His hair was thinner, his shoulders more bowed, but his eyes were alert. King Wilhelm went down to greet him. Leopold followed, feeling the weight of every step. "Your Grace," the king said, bowing. "Your Majesty," the Archbishop replied. "Your letter was interesting." "That is a polite word for it," Father Matthias murmured at Leopold's side. They gathered in a smaller chamber, away from curious eyes. No ministers, no Hohenberg, only the king, Leopold, Father Matthias, and the Archbishop. "I have read the file," the Archbishop began without ceremony. "What exists of it? It is incomplete. Certain documents are missing. Others are clearly copied in haste. The dates are puzzling." "Puzzling is another polite word," Father Matthias said. The Archbishop shot him a brief look, then turned to Leopold. "Your Highness, you say that the Lady Clara signed under pressure." "Yes," Leopold said. "She was threatened with harm to her family if she refused." "And she was not examined by a neutral physician?" the Archbishop asked. "Not to her knowledge," Leopold said, and certainly not in my presence. The Archbishop nodded slowly. I suspected as much. The language in these reports is vague. It is the kind of writing men use when they wish to sound serious without saying anything they could be held to. The king's jaw tightened. We accepted them, he said quietly. I accepted them. Yes, the Archbishop said. You did. And I signed the decree based on what I thought were honest representations. He sighed. It is not the first time princes have tried to bend the church to their needs. I fear it will not be the last, but this case has a particular smell. Leopold leaned forward. Can it be undone? The sacrament cannot be undone, the Archbishop said. Either it never truly existed, or it still exists now. That is what we must discern. He questioned Leopold for some time, about his intentions on his wedding day, about Clara's, about whether either had felt forced. Leopold answered as plainly as he could. I loved her, he said. She was the first person who spoke to me without fear of my title. I married her knowing it would anger half the court. No one forced me. They only tried to stop me. And her? The Archbishop asked. She married me knowing it would uproot her life, Leopold said. She was nervous but willing. They tried to persuade her then that she was too low, too simple. She refused that argument. The Archbishop nodded. Good. He turned to the king. Did you ever witness anything that suggested she was incapable of her duties? Only in the sense that she was too honest for this place, the king said. She did not play our games well. That is not an impediment, the Archbishop said dryly. They spoke then of threats, of dates, of the draft Clara now held. When they finished, the Archbishop folded his hands. My preliminary judgment, he said, is that grave injustice has been done. I must speak with the lady herself, of course. But based on what I have seen, I am inclined to say that the annulment was improperly granted. I will not let my seal be used to sanctify deceit. Leopold's breath caught. You mean? I mean that unless something very strange emerges, the Archbishop said, the Church will recognize your first marriage as still valid. You have been living apart from your wife, under the illusion that you are free. You are not. The king bowed his head. Then we must correct that illusion. The Archbishop's gaze softened. It will not be easy. Some will call it scandal, others will call it weakness. Let them, the king said. I prefer scandal to injustice. Then there remains the question of the child, the Archbishop said. I have heard rumors. Leopold's voice steadied. He will be born into truth, not whispers. Whatever you declare about the marriage, I will not let him be hidden. Good, the Archbishop said. Then let us finish our work. I will visit the Lady Clara myself. Clara was not thrilled when a prince, a priest, and an archbishop appeared at her door. Greta opened it again, and this time she nearly dropped her basin at the sight of the purple-trimmed cloak. Your Grace, she stammered. Clara, sitting on the edge of the bed, tried to rise. Do not, the Archbishop said quickly. Stay seated, child. A swollen belly outranks any bishop. She blinked, then let out an unexpected laugh. You are kinder than the council, she said. That is a low bar, I fear, he replied. They spoke gently. He asked her the same questions he had asked Leopold. Did she feel forced? Did she ever lie in her testimony? Did she understand fully what she signed? I understood that if I did not sign, my family would suffer, she said. I did not understand that the papers had already been written before I entered the room. He listened, eyes grave, and asked about her feelings on their wedding day, on the nights in between, on the morning she left. I loved him, she said simply. It made everything harder, not easier. When he asked about the child, her hand tightened. It is his, she said. I have no scientific proof to lay before you, but I know my own life, and I know myself. There was no one else. The Archbishop nodded. I do not doubt you. He stood at the end, looking around the small room. You have been cast down from one life into another, he said, and yet you kept your dignity like a cloak. At times it felt thin, she said. Even thin cloth warms if worn with courage, he replied. When he left, he kissed her brow lightly. Whatever I declare, remember this. You are not the sum of their decisions. She watched him go with tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. Days later, he summoned them all to the palace chapel. Clara came in a plain dress, cloak pulled tightly around her. Greta walked at her side. Leopold met them at the door, eyes searching her face. "Are you well enough?" he whispered. "I'm not made of glass," she said, "only of tired bones." He wanted to take her hand, but they were not alone. The king stood near the altar, Father Matthias to one side, the archbishop before the small sanctuary. A few chosen witnesses waited in the pews, Baron Adler and Friedrich among them, some older nobles whom the king trusted, and a handful of servants who had known Clara years before. The archbishop began without long prayers. His voice carried clearly. "We are gathered," he said, "to correct a wrong done in this house. The record of this kingdom says that a marriage once solemnized here was later dissolved. The record of heaven, I am convinced, says otherwise." Murmurs rippled through the small group. "The documents presented to my office," the archbishop continued, "were incomplete and misleading. Consent was compromised, truth was bent. Under such conditions, no decree I signed could carry the weight some claimed for it. Therefore, in the eyes of the Church, the sacrament of marriage between Leopold von Arnsberg and Clara Weiss still stands. It has stood all this time unbroken despite human error." Clara's heart hammered. Leopold's fingers dug into the wood of the pew. The archbishop's gaze went to them. "You have lived apart, you have suffered, you have been spoken about as if your bond were a foolish mistake. I tell you today, it was not. You were husband and wife, and you are husband and wife." Friedrich closed her eyes briefly, then opened them calm. King Wilhelm stepped forward. "I accept this judgment," he said. "Before God, before you, and before my people. The court's record will be corrected. Where it says that my son's first marriage was annulled, it will now say, unlawfully attempted and spiritually void." Father Matthias smiled faintly. "That is stronger language than I expected. I am an old man," the king said. "I have less time to waste on soft words." He turned to Clara. "I wronged you," he said. "I let my fear for the kingdom outweigh my duty to justice. I cannot give you back the years, but I can give you back your name, if you wish it." Clara swallowed. "What name, sire?" "Crown Princess," he said. "Your proper title. No one in this court will call you otherwise." Greta squeaked softly. Leopold's hand found the back of the pew for support. Clara looked at Leopold. "This is what you want?" she asked quietly. "To drag me back into the palace with every eye on me, every tongue sharp?" "I want you," he said, his voice low but firm. "The rest comes with me, not with you. They will look at me, Clara. Let them. I no longer care to live comfortably under a lie." The archbishop cleared his throat gently. "There remains one more matter we might address here while truth is fresh." He looked between them. "You married young. You were not given much chance to shape your vows. They were said quickly in the shadow of expectation. If you wish, Count, you may renew them. Freely now. Only if you both desire it." The chapel seemed to still around them. Clara's fingers curled on her cloak. "And if we do not?" she asked. "Then nothing changes in the spiritual record," the archbishop said. "You are married regardless, but saying them again may ease hearts that were broken the first time." Leopold turned fully to her. For a moment, the chapel, the king, the nobles all vanished. It was only him and the woman he had once led down an aisle he scarcely remembered for the fog of nerves. "We could refuse," he said softly. "You could walk out of here and never have to bow to anyone again. I will still provide for you and the child. I will shield you as best I can." "And you?" she asked. "What would you do?" "I would follow you as far as you let me," he said. "To another town, another country, a cottage like yours or a smaller one. I would give up this palace if staying meant losing whatever chance I have with you." She searched his face. "You say that now, with a crown hovering above your head." "I say it now," he replied, "because the crown feels lighter than the regret I have carried since you left. One I can put down, the other I cannot." Her eyes shone. "You would truly leave this?" "Yes," he said simply. "For you, yes." She let that sit between them, heavy and bright. Then she smiled, a small trembling thing. "You are a foolish man, Leopold von Arnsberg." "I have been called worse," he said. "But I think," she went on, "that the child kicking my ribs would be terribly offended if his father ran away from his own kingdom. He may wish to play in these halls one day, whether I like it or not." "You may tell him stories of cottages and freedom," he said. "I will tell him stories of duty and mistakes. Between us he might grow into something better than either." He held out his hand. "Clara, Will you stand with me? Not because they demand it, not because the church says we must, but because you choose me, again, or perhaps for the first time, truly." She stared at his hand for a heartbeat. Then she placed hers in it. "I will stand," she said, "on one condition." "Name it," he said, almost afraid. "That when our son or daughter comes of age," she said, "we teach them that no throne is worth more than a single person's dignity, and that if they ever try to cast someone aside as I was cast aside, we will haunt their dreams." Laughter rippled through the chapel. Even the king smiled. "Agreed," Leopold said, "on both counts." The archbishop stepped closer. "Then face each other." They did. "Repeat after me," he said gently, "but not because I tell you, because you mean it." Leopold spoke first, his voice steady. He promised to honor, to protect, to listen, to be truthful even when truth was hard. He promised not to let others speak for his heart again. Clara answered, promising to walk beside him, to remind him when he was wrong, to shelter him when the weight of his role pressed too hard. She promised not to silence herself for the sake of politeness when justice was at stake. No one mentioned obedience. They spoke instead of partnership. When it was done, the archbishop nodded. "Good. Those are better vows than the first ones we gave you." He lifted his hands. "What God joined, no man has truly torn apart. Let no one dare to try again." Leopold bent his head. Clara did the same. For the first time since their hurried wedding years ago, they both felt the words sink all the way in. Afterward, the chapel spilled into the corridor. People murmured, uncertain whether to bow to Clara differently now. Some did not. She walked through them with her head high, one hand on her belly, the other in Leopold's. Friedrich approached them, her father hovering at a cautious distance. "Your Highness," Friedrich said to Clara with a small curtsy. "Friedrich," Clara answered, "you do not have to—" "I want to," Friedrich said. "I wanted to meet you properly, without winter markets and bundles of wood." They studied each other quietly. "You defended him," Clara said. "And me, in there." "In a way, I defended myself," Friedrich replied. "I wanted to be certain I did not step on someone else's heart on my way to the altar." Clara smiled. "I am glad you did not. I hope," Friedrich said carefully, "that you will one day forgive me for the brief, furious jealousy I felt when I saw you in the square." "If you forgive me for being the cause of it," Clara said gently. Friedrich laughed. "Fair," she sobered. "Be good to him," she added, glancing at Leopold. "He needs someone who will not let him retreat into duty when things become difficult." "I have some practice," Clara said. "And you," Friedrich told Leopold, "be good to her. Do not forget that she came back into this palace not for its gold but for truth. If you tarnish that, I will travel from whatever distant house I end up in and scold you myself." "I believe you would," he said. They parted with warmth that would have seemed impossible months before. Time moved quickly after that. The court adjusted with its usual stubbornness and speed. Some clung to old whispers, others reshaped their stories overnight, claiming they had always suspected an injustice. The king announced the restoration of Clara's title and the court's support for the child to come. Foreign ambassadors wrote long letters home, but in the small cabin on the mountain, life narrowed to more immediate matters. Clara chose to give birth there, not in a glittering palace room. "I want the first breath our child takes to smell of wood smoke, not polish," she said. Leopold tried to argue once. "A prince should be born in a place of safety," he said. "The safest place is where I can breathe," she replied. "You may pace holes in the floor here as easily as in any palace hallway." So on a night when the wind howled around the eaves and snow rattled against the shutters, Leopold found himself pacing that small floor as promised. Greta and the midwife moved in and out of the bedroom. Sometimes Clara's cries reached him, short and sharp, each one twisted inside him. Father Matthias had come too, at Leopold's request. He sat by the fire, rosary in hand, murmuring prayers under his breath. "You were calmer in battle once," the priest remarked. "I had less to lose," Leopold said. Hours stretched. The midwife emerged twice to ask for more hot water, to mutter that first births are stubborn. Each time Leopold asked if Clara was well. Each time the midwife gave him a brief, firm nod. At last, the cry that broke through was different. Thin, outraged, incredibly alive. Leopold's legs nearly gave way. The midwife returned, face shining with sweat and satisfaction, a small bundle in her arms. "Well, Highness," she said, "you have yourself a child." He reached out as if afraid the little form might vanish. The baby's face was wrinkled, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in an indignant protest against the entire world. "Hello," Leopold whispered. His voice shook. The child quieted as if listening, then released a softer cry. "Is it?" He swallowed. "Is it a boy? A girl?" "A boy," the midwife said. "Strong lungs, good grip. He pinched me already." "A boy," Leopold repeated. The word felt strange and right at once. "My son." The midwife nodded toward the door. "Your lady is asking for you." He carried the bundle in, heart pounding anew. Clara lay exhausted, hair damp, face pale, eyes glowing with a light that was not from fever. When she saw him and the baby, something in her expression melted. "Come here," she whispered. He knelt by the bed, placing the child gently in the crook of her arm. The little face turned blindly, seeking warmth. "He is—" Leopold began, then stopped, unable to find the right word. "Real," Clara supplied. "That is enough." They watched their son for a moment, saying nothing. The tiny chest rose and fell. A small fist flexed. "Have you thought of a name?" Leopold asked. She smiled faintly. "I have had months to think. Too many ideas. But one returns again and again." "Tell me," he said. "Matthias," she said, "for a certain stubborn priest who refused to be quiet, and because it is a good, solid name. A boy can grow any kind of life on it." Leopold glanced back toward the outer room, where Father Matthias pretended not to listen. "That would please him," he said. "And you?" she asked. "It pleases me," he said. "Very much." He bent and pressed his lips to the baby's forehead. "Welcome, Matthias," he murmured. "You have caused no small trouble already." Clara laughed softly. "He will think that is his duty." Leopold lifted his head. The laughter faded into a softer look. "Thank you," he said, "for carrying him through all of this, for not giving up when you had every reason to." "You do not owe me thanks," she said. "You owe me truth. You have begun to pay that debt." "I will spend the rest of my life finishing it," he said. She shook her head fondly. "Do not make promises so grand you cannot keep them." "I intend to keep them," he replied. "Everyone." He reached for her hand. It was warm despite her fatigue. He brushed his thumb lightly over her knuckles. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming back into this storm with me?" She looked from his face to their son's, tiny and fierce between them. "For a long time I regretted almost everything," she said. "Leaving, staying, signing, loving. Regret became a habit. But sitting here now," she paused. "No, I do not regret this." He exhaled, his shoulders relaxing in a way they had not in years. "Nor do I," he said. Some days later, the king came up the mountain for the first time in his long reign. He insisted on climbing the last stretch on foot, despite protests. "A king should know how far his subjects walk in winter," he grumbled. In the cottage, he stood awkwardly at the threshold until Clara, sitting by the hearth with the baby in her arms, smiled and motioned him in. "Sire," she said, "we are not used to such visitors." "I am not used to such hosts," he replied. Leopold placed Matthias gently in his grandfather's arms. The king's hands, accustomed to scepters and documents, trembled slightly as they adjusted around the small, warm weight. The baby squinted up at him, unafraid. "Well," the king said gruffly, "you have your father's glare." "Poor child," Clara murmured. "Good lungs, though," the king added. "He will need them." Leopold watched his father's face soften in ways he had rarely seen. The hard lines eased, the eyes warmed. "This is the first time," Leopold said quietly, "that I have seen you hold a newborn without looking over his head at a map." The king huffed a small laugh. "Perhaps I am finally learning where to put my gaze." He looked at Clara. "If you will permit it, I would like to present him to the court, on your terms, not as a prize, but as my grandson. Has the child whose existence forced his elders to tell the truth?" Clara nodded slowly. "If it protects him and others who come after, then yes, present him. But do not let them turn him into a story that erases how he came to be." "I will not," the king said. He handed Matthias back a little reluctantly. As he did, the baby's small hand closed around his finger. The king stilled, then smiled. Stubborn grip, he said. He will hold this kingdom more firmly than I did, perhaps. Not if we raise him to believe it belongs to him alone, Clara said. You will help us with that. Are you giving me tasks already? The king asked. You truly are princess again. Someone must keep you busy in honest ways, she said. He laughed, this time more freely. Very well, I accept my orders. Spring came slowly to the mountains. Snow withdrew by inches. The little tree in the palace garden, forgotten by most, unfurled its first proper leaves. On a mild afternoon, Leopold took Clara and Matthias down to see it. This is what you planted, he said. She looked at the thin trunk, the crooked branches. It is not much to look at, she said. Neither were we when we first married, he replied. Young, bent by others' hands, but stubborn, she touched the bark gently. It survived the gardener's plans. So did we, he said. They walked along the garden path, Matthew dozing in Clara's arms. Courtiers watched from a distance, curiosity mixing with something like respect. News of the archbishop's ruling, of the king's public apology, of the prince's refusal to hide his family, had spread beyond Innsbruck. Leopold stopped in a quiet corner, away from most windows. He turned to her, suddenly shy. I have stood in front of rooms full of men who wanted to tear my life apart, he said. I have argued with bishops and barons, but asking for this still frightens me. For what? She asked, brow furrowing. For a chance to begin again, he said. Truly begin. Not as two frightened young people escorted by others' expectations, as ourselves, as we are now, cracked perhaps, but still whole. She studied him. What would that beginning look like? She asked. He smiled. We wake in the morning. You scold me for leaving my boots where you trip over them. I remind you not to climb ladders in your condition. I am no longer pregnant, she reminded him. In your future conditions, he amended, flushing. We argue about small things instead of letting others decide the large ones. We raise our son to be less afraid than we were. We eat at least one meal a day that is not interrupted by a messenger, she laughed. You dream extravagantly, Highness. I dream modestly, he said. I dream of your hand in mine without anyone between us. I dream of being allowed to love you in the open, as I have loved you in secret all these years. Her breath caught. You loved me in secret. I tried to stop, he admitted. I told myself you were gone. I told myself duty demanded I bury that part of me. But every time I walked past that garden, or through the rooms we once shared, it all rose again. I did not know how to live without that ache, until I saw you in the square carrying wood, and realized that what hurt was not love, but cowardice. And now? She asked softly. Now I am tired of cowardice, he said. And I am very much in love with my wife. She blinked rapidly. Say it again, she whispered. I love you, Clara, he said. The words were simple, unadorned. I loved you then, foolishly. I love you now, more soberly. I will love you when our hair is white, and our son complains that we do not let him make enough mistakes of his own. Tears spilled over her lashes. She laughed through them. You are very certain he will complain. He will be our child, Leopold said. He will complain about everything. She reached up with her free hand and touched his cheek. You hurt me, she said, more than I thought I could be hurt. I do not forget that. I would not ask you to, he said. But you have also changed, she went on. You have stood up to your father, to your ministers, to your own fears. You have walked that mountain path with me instead of sending others. Her thumb brushed his skin gently. And you have held our son as if he were the first miracle you ever saw. He is, Leopold said. She took a breath. I cannot promise to never feel the old pain, she said. But I can promise this. I will not let it rule me. I will not let it be the last word. I would rather write a new ending with you than stay forever in the middle of our story. Is that a yes? He asked, voice unsteady. It is a yes, she said. To you, to us, to this crooked little life we have been given back. He leaned toward her slowly, giving her every chance to draw back. She did not. Their lips met, gently at first, then with a depth that spoke of all the years lost and found again. It was not the tentative kiss of their first youth. It was steadier, more certain, carrying the weight of grief and the lightness of forgiveness together. Matthias stirred between them, grumbling at being squashed. They broke apart, laughing. Already interrupting, Leopold said. He truly is mine. Clara rested her forehead against his. Ours, she corrected. Ours, he agreed. They stood there for a while, the three of them, in the thin shade of the young tree. In the years that followed, people would tell their story in many ways. Some would speak of scandal turned to grace. Others would mention dates and decrees and the great archbishop who overturned an injustice. But those who had watched up close would remember something simpler. They would remember a prince who learned that crowns bend more easily than the truth, a woman who refused to let shame define her, and a child who entered the world crying loudly enough to wake the conscience of a kingdom. And they would remember the way, on that early spring afternoon, the prince and his once-lost wife stood in the palace garden with their son, and finally chose each other not as duty, not as sacrifice, but as the quiet, stubborn love that would carry them through whatever seasons came next. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.